Hi,
Hi.
Hey, hello.
how are you?
Very good. It's my second time talking in Central Asia. Very excited.
Great. So you was before in Kazakhstan, right?
I went to Kazakhstan last year to give a talk and explore Kazakhstan for about a week. I went around hiking and all. Wanted to go to Kyrgyzstan this time, but unfortunately, COVID kept me at home. So hope to visit someday.
Yes, that will be great if you come here.
I would
Yes.
love to come.
Okay, guys, if you have some question for the next speaker, to Julius U, you can ask in our comments line in YouTube. Okay, Julius, good luck.
All right, I need lots of that. Thank you. Hey everyone, so good to see you. And today we're going to talk about scientific leadership. And I hope that, from the two very good talks right before me, there's still something left to learn here. So let's see how it goes. Unfortunately, YouTube Live is about 10-15 seconds delayed. So when I start to ask a question, I might have to pause a bit, but hopefully this works just fine. So I want to start off by asking one question, which is this. In the video game industry, which do you think contributes to the highest revenue? Is it game design? Is it middle management? Or is it company brand? So I'll take a pause here and then I'll kind of try to look at YouTube Live if there's any response to this, and then I'll proceed right after. So, what comes from this research actually shows that it's actually the middle management that has the biggest contribution in terms of revenue, which is very interesting. Because if you think about it, unless you're an individual contributor, unless you're a software engineer who's dealing primarily with software, you are actually more likely to be a middle manager. And the thing is, as the chain of command goes up, the manager reports to his manager until eventually it reaches the CEO. And we're like, of course, there's no one higher than the CEO, right? However, it's quite interesting because in publicly traded companies or companies with investors, the CEO actually reports to the board of directors. And the CEO, as you might know, could get fired because the board of directors doesn't agree with the direction of the CEO. And we might think that, well, it ends with the board of directors, right? Well, not true. It turns out that the board of directors actually report to the investors. So, in other words, oops, okay, so I think I kind of missed something. Hello.
No, it's okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Okay, sounds good. So it turns out that the board of directors actually report to the investors, which is quite interesting because, as you can see, everyone is actually a middle manager unless they're an individual contributor. What the research tells us then is that while the company brand and the product helps the company succeeds, the main contributor to the success of a company is actually the people. However, one thing that's extremely interesting that came out from a research done by Gallup is that only 1 out of 10 managers actually have the skill set to be an effective one. 2 out of 10 with enough training can actually be sufficiently good, but not great. So, what that means is that for the most part, we might actually be working under a manager that could need more help. What that also means is that companies with highly engaged employees, companies with very good middle managers, are actually outperforming their peers by as much as 147%. Let me be clear here. We are not talking about 47% increase. We are talking about 147% increase. What this means is that they are actually effectively doubling their headcount and more without actually paying more, which means that so long as you have very good middle manager, research shows that you can extremely outperform your competitors by a significant margin. So today we're going to talk about scientific leadership. I'm going to show you about a dozen or so more scientific research that talks about how we can improve our management skills as well as leadership skills, whether we are an individual contributor or a people manager. I work at Hubble. It's a construction tech company. And I'm actually from GDG Singapore, all the way from Southeast Asia. It's so good to be with you again. And let's look at a study called the Fairness Study. Take a look at this YouTube video. It's about 2 minutes long. Let's see how it goes.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs and with birds and with chimpanzees, but with Sarah Brosnan we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group. They know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now, if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, that's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber, and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests a rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
So notice what just happened. What happened is that the monkey, when he was given a cucumber, at first he was happy about it, no problem. But when he sees that the other monkey actually received grapes, he became extremely upset. Now think about it. Uh, Giving a rock in exchange for a cucumber is infinitely beneficial for the monkey because a rock is meaningless. It has no value for the monkey, but a cucumber he can eat. However, the moment he sees the other monkey receiving grape, which is more tasty than a cucumber, he was extremely upset. Now, traditional economics for a very long period of time predicted that the monkey should have been happy even if he had received cucumber because a cucumber has more value than a rock. But that's not what happened. Why? That's because the monkey is not fully rational. Now, we are not monkeys, some people might argue, but even humans, even dogs, even birds have the same tendency to actually look at things and evaluate it not just from a fully rational perspective, but also with their emotions. In fact, there's another experiment that's done very similar to this, which is called the ultimatum game. So the way it works is like this. So what the experimenter does is that she tells the male guy right here to to receive $100 bill from her, and then what he has to do is to split the $100 bill with the girl right next to him. Now this is in full hearing of the girl. Now here's the catch: if the girl rejects the split, meaning to say, if the guy gives an amount of money to the girl and she is not happy with it, nobody gets the money. But if she is happy with it, both of them gets the money. So think about it for a short instance. So suppose he splits the money $50 each, both of them would be happy enough, and then they would split the money, both of them gets the money. If he gives her $40, she will be probably happy enough to say yes, and then both of them gets the money. But think about it. What if he gives her only $5 and he keeps 95? There's the lower the amount of money he gives to her, the higher the chance that she will be upset about him, because for her, the other guy actually had $100. Giving her only $5 means that the other guy is not being fair to her. Now, traditional economics will say that so long as she received at least $1, she should have been happy. Reason is because she doesn't have anything in the first place. So, traditional economics rely on the theory that humans are rational creatures. That is true. However, recent studies in economics, which is called behavioral economics, predicts very, very differently. Behavioral economics includes emotions on top of rationality in order to understand how people make economic decisions. That having said, it's not very difficult to see how it's connected to our brain. The brain is an extremely complex organ, and so people who study neuroscience might say that we are dumping everything down here, which is actually true, but for the purposes of this talk, it will be good enough. So, as part of our brain, there are two very important parts which we have to learn today, if we haven't done so. One is called the prefrontal cortex, and one is the amygdala. Now, the prefrontal cortex, what it does is that it regulates the rational behavior of our minds. So, whenever we try to solve an algorithmic problem, whenever we do our QA processes, project management, whenever we do problem solving, the prefrontal cortex activates. That's what we regularly use. Now, we also have the amygdala. So what the amygdala does is that it's actually the fight or flight part of our brain. So what it does is that in moments that we feel negative emotions such as fear, anger, disgust, the amygdala activates. It tells our brain to actually either fight or actually flee. So that's the fight and flight part of the brain. Now what's extremely interesting here is that when the amygdala activates, the prefrontal cortex deactivates, which explains why, in many, many occasions, when we are upset, when we are disgusted, when we are afraid, we tend to make decisions that we would later regret. That's just the nature of how our brain works. In a very similar fashion, what we have seen in the previous two experiments is a reflection of what we are seeing here. What does research tell us further about this? It turns out that in the medical field, about 71% of errors that has been made could have actually been avoided had the nurses and the doctors in general, medical professionals, have been using their prefrontal cortex. However, because of the sophistication and the pressure in the medical field, people's amygdala activates constantly. This caused as much as 27% of patient deaths that could have been avoided. In fact, another research in the US shows that as much as 80% of people lose time at work worrying about an incident due to incivility at work. And as you can see, there are other numbers here which has significant impact in the decrease in productivity of the workforce. So how do we solve this kind of problem? In the workplace, it's extremely important for us to establish psychological safety. At Google, they have five very important virtues whenever they evaluate management and the team. Psychological safety is number one. In fact, even if they have five virtues that they actually follow, number two to number five is significantly less important than psychological safety. When people feel that they are psychologically safe, they are more likely to ask for help, admit errors, and seek feedback. In fact, they think that as long as I am psychologically safe, actions that could actually threaten me is no longer threatening for me because the team provides an avenue for me to express myself and express my needs so that altogether the team can prosper and likewise the organization. Another thing that's extremely important in a study done by Cornell University is that in the company, it's very, very common for us to have idea conflict. Which algorithm should we use? Which design pattern should we use? Which architecture pattern should we use? Do we do TDD? Do we not do TDD? Do we use Scrum? Do we use Kanban? Do we use OKR? Do we use KPI? There's a lot of ideas conflict. And in general, people have good intent. People are employed in a company in order to perform. People in general have good intent. However, in the absence of a good relationship, ideas conflict can actually descend into relationship conflict. And so it's extremely important to build trust from the CEO all the way down. What it does is that so long as you are able to build trust in the event of an idea conflict, the relationship is strong enough to actually defray any relationship anchor that could have accompanied idea conflict. Um, One very important slide, perhaps one of the most important one for this talk, is that research shows that managers who listen, individual contributors who listen, in general, team members who listen, actually significantly increase the performance of the team. It's extremely important for us to take a pause, despite us needing or wanting to answer straight away, to listen to what other people has to say before we give our opinion. Another research shows that establishing positivity in the workplace creates a significant amount of benefit in terms of creative problem solving. One of the advice that Google actually gives to their managers is that instead of shooting ideas down, which are generally very raw when they are first proposed, one of the better questions that they ask their managers to ask their team members is to say, how can we make a particular idea work? That way, people are now more involved in actually solving problems than actually shooting ideas down. So again, our brain is playing tricks on us, so we need to optimize for brain function for the team to be effective. Here's number two. Interestingly, we have to be very, very careful of confidence. Confidence is good if it's done and it's executed in the right level. The problem is that confidence makes us feel certain, not think certain. It makes us feel certain in the absence of sufficient supporting data. And that has nothing to do at all with the validity of the confidence. It has everything to do with our brain. It's because of the certainty effect as discovered in prospect theory. So, what certainty effect does is that it's a cognitive bias that each one of us has, whereby we are more inclined to latch onto the feelings of certainty, even if the odds or the data says otherwise. Now, let me be clear here. Confidence has its value. Confidence is very useful in sales, it's very useful in marketing, but in software engineering in general, in professions that involves a significant amount of problem solving, confidence should not trump data. Here's a study done by Fu, Lee, and I don't know how to pronounce the other guy's name, but here's the idea. So, what they did is they actually put different people together with varying degrees of sophistication in a certain activity. So, what you can see here in the horizontal bar, in the horizontal graph, is that the least competent a person is, the more chances that they are overconfident about their skill. If you look at the blue bar, those who have less skills, look at number one and number two, the blue bar is higher. But now, as they become more sophisticated, if you look at the red bar, they are actually underconfident. In fact, the better they are in this particular subject matter, the less confident they are, which is extremely tricky if you think about it, because we are conditioned to actually look at television, media, whereby people with a lot of confidence are actually out there explaining quote unquote reality to us. But when we look at scientific study, a different perspective emerges, whereby experts are actually less confident than non experts. Another research by Dunning and Kruger, which many of you probably have known by now, is the Dunning-Kruger effect, whereby what it shows is that people who has very limited knowledge are usually the one who's overconfident because people overestimate their skills. But as they grow deeper into the subject matter, they start to lose that confidence which they used to have because now the well of knowledge opens up to them and they realize it's more sophisticated than what they initially thought. Another book by Tom Nichols, which was published about 2 or 3 years ago, says that in general, people lack the skill called metacognition, which is the ability to actually recognize that we are doing something wrong, our perspective is wrong, and taking a step back and re-evaluating whether our perspective is actually valid or not. Here's another research. There's a wall of text here, so you don't have to read it. You can just listen to what I have to say. So let me skip this slide and let me go back a few slides. So if you might recall in this slide, so what they did in that experiment is that they paired up people with different levels of confidence and make them perform a certain type of activity. So let's say, for example, you have someone who's overconfident but not very sophisticated, and someone who's underconfident but very sophisticated in the same subject matter, and they pair them up, and then they perform that activity. And they group together different pairs with different degrees of confidence and different degrees of skill. Now, what happened? It turns out that the bigger the gap between confidence and the subject matter expert, the worse they perform, which means that the unjustified role of confidence in decision making actually harms if the person with the most confidence is the one that's least sophisticated. So, in other words, it's very important for us to nuance between confidence and competence. Confidence is an illusion. In fact, a book published by Robert Burton, former chief neurologist, says that certainty is not biologically possible. So while we are conditioned to feel that certainty has a very good feeling to us, we need to learn to tolerate the unpleasantness of uncertainty because it's just biologically impossible to achieve. Again, our brain is playing tricks on us. And so, in order to address this, we need to let the data speak. Confidence has its value in sales and marketing, but in software engineering and in general, in problem solving professions, it's extremely important for us to let the data speak. Another interesting research is the science behind human motivation. In the industrial age, in the 1940s, 1950s, people have always noted that money is equal to performance. The bigger you pay the person, the better they perform. Now, in recent years, this perspective has actually been challenged a lot. So, here's a problem that's done by Dunker. Here's the idea. So, he has a candle, and he has a box of Tamtacs, and he has a box of match. And so what he did was he wanted his subjects, meaning the people that he's experimenting with, to actually light the candle. But here's the catch. When he lights the candle, the candle wax should not melt and drip on the table. Now, I'm going to pause for about 15 seconds. And if you're interested to think about how to solve this problem, you can think about it. And after about 15 seconds, I'll actually show you the actual answer to it. And then I'll give you more details about what the research shows. So actually, here's one of the answer to the problem. So when I did the same talk in Singapore, some people actually have found other answers. But here's one of the ways to actually solve the problem. So in order for the wax to actually not melt on the table, you actually have to use the box in and put the candle on top of it, and then it doesn't go all the way down to the table. So what Dunker did was actually quite interesting. So what he did was he actually divided the group into two. So one group he says that okay, I'm just here to actually see on the average how much a person takes to actually solve the puzzle. But then in the other group, what he said was, okay, if you are the fastest 25%, I'm going to give you $5. And if you're the fastest, you get $20. So now, traditional study on human motivation will tell us that group B will actually perform better because, again, if you have money, then people in general will perform better. But it turns out that in the research, group B took 210 seconds longer to solve the puzzle. So what's going on? Super interesting. It turns out that research shows that so long as the task doesn't require creative problem solving, monetary rewards work. But the moment they have to do creative problem solving, which is what software engineers, what quality assurance engineers, what project managers do, it turns out to be a very, very different outcome. So why is that? The reason primarily is because we have very limited mental real estate. So the moment we use more mental real estate to try to win the race, to try to beat other people, the moment money is continuously in our heads, what happens is that we have less and less mental real estate to actually use for problem solving. So one of the suggestion actually is that I think this is also very similar to the one of the question that's being asked in the live chat is that when we pay people just enough for them to be sufficiently motivated to do their job well. So what that means is that we don't underpay people because they always have the money on their heads when they do their work. We also don't overpay people because the moment we do so, what happens is that people will take a step back and start thinking if they're contributing enough relative to the compensation they're receiving. So the most important for us to do is to actually pay people just enough to make them feel happy, feel validated, and then we provide them with as much intrinsic motivation as possible. So here are the three intrinsic motivation that's done by Daniel Pink in his book called Drive. So what he discovered is that there are three things that makes people intrinsically motivated. Number one, they need to feel that they're autonomous. They're free to do what they want to do and how they best do it. They also need to feel that they are increasing in their level of mastery in a certain subject matter. If they're interested in that subject matter and they're growing in it, they become more motivated. And the last one is that so long as they see a very good purpose in what they're doing, they will feel extremely motivated. So when the boss is able to provide all three, in general, the person stays in the company, they become productive in the company because they feel intrinsically motivated. Notice the word I'm using. I'm not using the word think, I'm using the word feel because while humans are thinkers, humans are feelers as well. In fact, emotions has a significant impact in the way we decide, in the way we operate as human beings. That's what the science says. Here's some CEOs and COOs that you might recognize here and there. You have Steve Jobs, you have Tim Cook, and a bunch of other people. Now, in Silicon Valley, they are extremely popular. But there's this one guy, Bill Campbell, CEO of Intuit, that doesn't enjoy the same limelight as the nine before him. But what's extremely interesting in Silicon Valley is that all nine of them are actually mentored by Bill Campbell. Bill Campbell passed away in 2015, and during his the time where people are mourning for his loss, it's a very unusual event whereby you have billionaires actually coming in, and it's a very rare event where they congregate together to celebrate the life of Bill Campbell. So, Eric Smith, last year, he wrote this book along with a few other Googlers about the Trillion Dollar Coach. It's called the Trillion Dollar because Bill Campbell actually mentored several CEOs of companies that eventually reach $1 trillion valuation, such as Amazon and Apple. So, as part of the research that they have done on how Bill Campbell did his leadership, is that Bill Campbell, in general, he emphasized on organizational compassion. So, what this means is something extremely different from what how we traditionally think of compassion in the organization. In general, we are told to actually leave our emotions out of the door as we enter the office because the office is a different workplace, it's a different environment. But it turns out that from Bill Campbell's like leadership style and also validated by several behavioral research is that organizational compassion actually increase team productivity, and especially it works when the leaders are able to demonstrate that organizational compassion goes from all the way from the top to down. Another super interesting research done by Gallup is that it turns out that female managers are actually better than male managers. And what they found out is that the main reason why female are better than male managers is not because of gender, actually. It's primarily because female feel more empathy. They actually operate with empathy. And so it turns out that empathy is an extremely important management skill. It's an extremely important leadership skill. In fact, it's an extremely important life skill that everyone from individual contributors all the way until management and above needs to employ in order for us to produce better results, better productivity, and better output. Organizational compassion, as also research by George Mason, shows that there's lower absenteeism, better team performance, better teamwork, and higher employee satisfaction. So let me try to close off with the last few slides in my talk. Humans are emotional rational creatures. Uh, People have emotions. And so it also turns out that emotions dampen our productivity. And so, how do we solve negative emotions? We establish psychological safety, we build trust, we establish positivity in the workplace, and we always listen. We need to be very careful of confidence, and we always need to use hard data as evidence. Remember, competence is not confidence. We need to be able to differentiate both. Humans are driven by extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. And so, in general, it's good to pay people just enough and then provide them with as much intrinsic motivation as possible. And to wrap it all up, it's important for us to emphasize organizational compassion. Here are some books about leadership that you might be interested in. The second book is quite interesting because it tells us a very very different view of leadership that you won't see in books from people like John Maxwell and Simon Sinek. It's a very well researched book. It's a very strong recommendation. Here's another set of books. The second one, interestingly, it's very similar to what Roman spoke about just now. It talks about OKRs and extremely helpful as well. Here's a final set of books that you might find extremely interesting as well. Since there will be a recording of this later on, you can actually go back to the video and actually see more of it. And finally, some references. Not sure if anyone is interested with it. You can always go back to the video if you want to. And here are some more references and some more references. Once again, thank you so much. It's so good to be with you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leos.
Thank you.
Guys, if you have some question for to our speaker, you can ask it now. Maybe not a question.
No, actually, for the current time, I have no questions.
All right, that's good. For me, I guess.
So let's wait for a little. Maybe someone already typing. Выведи вот это пока что. Что спросить?
Oh, thank you, Alexandra. I really appreciate it.
Oh, we have a question.
Yeah. So the question is, how organizations should motivate the team, materialistic or non-materialistic? Um, so it turns out that different people have actually different types of motivation. So whenever a person joins a company, it's not clear what they're looking for. So it's important for the manager to actually find out. So that's how one-on-ones become important. I think in Romance Talk, he actually mentioned a little bit about one-on-ones. So what one-on-one does is that it allows the manager to see what the employee is looking for within the company. Some people actually take pay cuts to join a company, which means that when they join a company, they're not looking for money, they're looking for experience, they're looking for learning. A lot of people will actually take a lower salary in exchange for things to learn. So it's very important for the management team to actually know what the person is looking for and actually provide it to them. So, yes, there are certain trade offs. One axiom in running a company is that it's very important for the leaders of the company to minimize the amount of resource needed to achieve an organizational goal. So what that means is that if we are actually able to reduce the amount of cost in order to keep people happy, that would be a good option to go for. And so it's a case to case basis. There's no one size fits all. It can only be known when the manager knows what the person needs and wants and be able to actually provide it for them, so long as it's something that the company is able to do so.
So thanks
Thank
very,
you.
uh, thank you very, Julius. It was really interesting for us. We really love your presentation.
Thank you.
So we have last question.
So the question is, so the fact that money can motivate only if the task doesn't require creativity, what if by getting money people start thinking about time when they already had gained the money? I'm not sure I understand this question. Um, I'm I'm very sorry. I don't think I understand this question.
Oh dear.
um, yeah, maybe I can respond in the chat, so that I don't block the time.
Okay. You?
So here come one question. Sorry, it's really last question. About which characteristics should have true leader?
Huh, very interesting. So this is not part of my talk, but it's part of the second book that I mentioned. If you don't mind, I'll share the slide. Um, So the second book, right here, the book called the New Psychology of Leadership. So what the research says is that uh, the best predictor of a good leader is actually fairness. So when a leader is perceived to be fair, he's actually able to influence significantly more than any other quality. So while companies like Google, for example, actually pushes people to be humble, to be respectful, and to build trust, it turns out that all of them are trumped by fairness. So fairness is the most important quality a leader should have.
Thank you.
Thank you. You.
Thank you.
So
What? Okay. We have not any questions. So, okay, Yunus, thank you. Goodbye. Have a nice week. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you. Have a good weekend. Bye bye.